Good morning. We're live. Welcome to Breaking Through the Disruption, brought to you by RE Journals. Today, we've got a really good panel today. I was talking to these guys in the chat room. It's going to be good. We've got Powering Chicago as our sponsor. They're going to take the lead on moderating. This is going to be fun. I got to talk to you real quick about a couple technical things. If you're having connection issues, if you see somebody on your screen glitch out, I'm looking at our server and I see 4 or 5 bars. We're in pretty good shape here. So this is the moment in our relationship when I say it's you, it's not me. So knowing that it's you, there's a reconnect button at the top. All you got to do is push that button. That'll solve 99% of your problems. You may end up pushing it 2 or 3 times. I apologize for that. But the internet's a busy place these days. So if you have that, if that doesn't work, use Google Chrome for just about everything except for an iPhone. You want to use Safari if you're in trouble with either of those. Copy and paste the link, put it in your browser. That should solve it. There's a chat room to your right. That's where I'd go right now. Put my name, location, questions, anything you got in that chat room. When you ask questions of our panelists, I'll mark them with a red Q. They'll be able to see them. They'll probably save most of them towards the end, but that's where your questions go. There's a poll. When I click a poll, and I will do that, it's going to cover up your chat room for a second. So just answer that poll. It'll close back down. You can go back to chatting. We also have a pretty cool offer to an ad today. This is the first time I've done this, so bear with me. If you look on the side of your screen, you might see a Powering Chicago ad with a link to their website. So thank you for Powering Chicago, and I hope that little thing works there. We have a YouTube channel, so if you missed part of today's webinar, you want to forward it to a friend, you loved it and you want to rewatch it again, it's out there on YouTube. If you do go, you just go to our website and look at our video replays, or you can go to our webinars and click at it from there. If you go out to YouTube, though, do me a favor and subscribe to our channel. We're at like 150 subscribers, and I bet my kids we could get to 500. I'm not even close. So appreciate that. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to pass this off. Albert Walters III is our moderator today. He's going to take it away. Thank you, Albert, and look forward to the event.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Todd, for that introduction. And many, many thanks to Real Estate Journal for allowing us this opportunity to discuss this relevant and critical topic, reopening preparedness in the midst of a COVID-19 pandemic. Again, my name is Albert Walters III, and I am the moderator, and I am also the director of Powering Chicago. For those who are not aware, Powering Chicago is a partnership by and between the Union Electricians of IBEW Local 134 and the Electrical Contractors Association of Chicago, which promotes the benefits of using union skilled labor. These benefits are on display throughout the many facets of our industry, providing the best construction, better careers, and better community. So if you'd like to know more about these benefits, about our partners, or about Powering Chicago, please connect to poweringchicago.com. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank everyone who is joining us on this morning. I do encourage your engagement, so please submit any questions that you have, and we will look to get to all of those questions at the end of our discussion. Also, if you have a specific question for a specific panelist, please, if you can, notate that. Last but not least, I would like to thank all of the panelists for joining us today. I do have an ask for them as well. Once I introduce you by name, if you could please offer a little bit of background information for our audience's benefit. So, without further ado, let's introduce our panelists. First, we have the Executive Director of Industry and Innovation from the National Electrical Contractors Association, Josh Bohm.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. It's good to be here today. NECA is the National Electrical Contractors Association. We have over 4,000 union contractors that are signatory to the IBEW. That's the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. So I run innovation there. In addition to that, I also run our foundation, Electri, that provides research looking at current challenges electrical contractors face today and where they're going in the future. So do a lot of research there, a lot of fun things that I do, and excited to have this opportunity today, Albert.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Josh. We also have the Executive Director of Cushman & Wakefield, Stephen Bauer.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Albert. I'm Steve Bauer with Cushman & Wakefield. I'm a tenant rep broker, and I focus my time about halfway on doing business in the central business district with office users, and the other half helping companies around the rest of the U.S. and across the globe. So obviously talking to a lot of end users right now, and look forward to being a part of this discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Next is the Director of Interiors for GREC Architects, Michael Berger.
Thank you, Albert. GREC is an architecture firm whose work takes us across the country, a lot of it here in Chicago as well. On the core and shell side, we work in a lot of hospitality, and a lot of the work that I work in is in the workplace, the corporate interiors. And certainly we're seeing, as is Steve, talking with a lot of clients and sort of understanding how their workplace needs are changing, and we'll get into that.
Great. Wonderful. And I look forward to it. And finally, we have with us the Vice President of Malco Communication Services, Mr. Thomas Peterniana. How did I do, Thomas?
Hey, great. Thank you, Albert. Happy to be here. I'm the Vice President of Malco Communication Services. We are a 96-year-old union electrical contractor out of Chicago. We offer a complete list of low voltage services, and we're typically working in the commercial real estate space. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, so we'll get right out of the gate with the first question, and I'll direct this question to Steve. Steve, what are some of the concerns that you're hearing from your clients about the commercial real estate needs around the pandemic, and where do you see this market headed, not only in the immediate, but the near future regarding those apprehensions?
Yeah, thank you, Albert. So I'm going to answer this with a focus on what we're hearing specific to Central Business District in Chicago, but also across the U.S. And we talk to a lot of people, asset managers, owners, and a lot of people internally. So I'm going to kind of amalgamate thoughts that we're hearing here regarding real estate. But I think a good way to look at where we are in the market today is to step back 3 months and say, well, where were we pre-pandemic in the market? And, for lack of a better word, we were healthy. The Central Business District of Chicago was very, very healthy from a leasing perspective leading into this pandemic. There was a fight for talent. There were companies that were trying to recruit and retain the best talent that they could possibly find. We had rental rates that were going up in the CBD. A big part of that is because concessions were high. When I say concessions, I mean tenant improvement dollars, abatement. And the reason was it cost a lot to build these nice spaces that companies were building. So you had rates going up, concessions going up. You had people signing long-term leases, and you had high velocity. We had between 6 and 7 million feet of office tenants in the market when we were in January looking for space above 25,000 feet. And the other part of the equation of health is supply. We are entering this downturn with minimal amount of supply or new building developments in the city of Chicago. We hear a lot about Fulton Market, but Fulton Market is still a small market. It's still, between 2 and 3 million feet today. There's a couple more million feet coming out of the ground. So we have a good amount of supply there. But when you look at the trophy world of Chicago, the Class A plus buildings, the new buildings, we have 4% vacancy across that entire portfolio of buildings, extremely healthy. The 3 newest buildings that came online, 444 Lake, 150 Riverside, and 151 Franklin, are all fully leased. And the next 3 coming out of the ground have done very well pre-leasing. So we enter the pandemic being in a healthy real estate market for Chicago. So now today, March, 23rd hits or whatever we call it, and we're all at home, middle of March. The first thing that we saw was velocity stopping in deals. Unless you absolutely had to do a transaction, we saw people and CFOs and decision makers say, I'm just going to wait. The first question we got as real estate brokers was, well, if I can't use my space, why do I have to pay for my space? That was the first thing we dealt with for the first couple of weeks. And the reality is most tenants are obligated to pay their rent. But what we did see was many owners go to their retailers and say, we want to keep you afloat. We want to keep this coffee shop in the building. How do we work with you as a partner? And we also saw that with tenants. If a tenant was truly struggling, we saw owners proactively have discussions with them and say, maybe it's not abatement, but how do we help you defer rent? So we got through that first couple of weeks. And then what we came into was a lot of webinars like many of you have sat on, which is about the safety. How do we get our people safely back into the space? And I know we're going to talk about that more here in a couple minutes, but for call it 2 months, that was a lot of the discussion. We had minimal velocity in the market still. People are saying, let's just wait and see what happens with the market. We had subleases start creeping up. No surprise there. Like any recession, we're going to see some space hit the market, some nicely built out space. The number one thing we heard from our end users was to safely get back in the space. I'm worried about transit. I'm worried about elevators, but it's really on us as a company to figure out a safe environment to create. And most of our clients are saying, well, we're simply going to de-densify the space. We're going to have an A team and a B team. You're going to come in 2 days a week. This team and the other team 2 days a week, and we're just simply going to de-densify. But now we're into today. Where are we now? And it seems like in the last couple of weeks, we've hit a almost third phase, I'm going to call it. And now is, to steal a quote from the CEO of Cushman & Wakefield, the billion-dollar question, which is how are companies going to use their space going forward? Have we lost much by working at home? Is there a place for a hybrid type model? And we don't think there's a one size fits all. It's going to be across industries. It's going to be across certain functions. But Cushman & Wakefield did a large survey. They had 50,000 end user respondents. The findings came out this week. It was a great webinar that you can find online. And one of the big takeaways, and no surprise here, but people said, yeah, I could do my work. I can get everything done. But that's not why I necessarily work at a company. I work at a company for training. I work at a company for mentorship. I work at a specific company for the culture, and I'm not getting that. And we especially saw that come through in the survey results with the younger talent that is out there has said, yeah, I can get stuff done, but I don't like it. I want to be in the office at least part-time. So there's a lot of speculation happening about, are people going to use more space, less space? How is it going to affect the industry? But I think right now, it's no more than speculation. Once we start getting back in the space, it's going to feel different. And the end users we're talking to are saying, we're ready to get back in. We're going to do it slowly, but we want to be in. As it relates to the market in the next 6 to 12 months and what we think we're going to see, we have seen an uptick of activity the last couple of weeks with smaller tenants, call it those 5 to 10,000 foot users. Most seem to be looking for shorter term space. They're looking for pre-built out space so that they don't have to spend a lot of capital. And really, if we look at the next few months, or next maybe year, what are we going to see? We think it's going to be a lot more of the same. It's going to be companies that are looking for shorter term deals, built out deals. Cash is king. They're going to want to keep the dollars in their pockets. And there's going to be a slow thaw until we get back to seeing the major velocity and larger relocations that we have been seeing the last couple of years. But there is a major glimmer of hope and uptick in activity here the last couple of weeks, which we're obviously happy to see.
Thank you. Well, you mentioned a few things there, and one of the things that I see as a concern for me, and I'm sure for many of our guests, is that one of the primary ways to stop the spread of COVID-19 has been to limit the exposure and increase the social distancing, right? Based on what you've experienced, Michael, how has COVID-19 affected the traditional office space?
Thanks, Albert. A little bit to what Steve was saying, there are some things that are still being figured out, and people are understanding exactly what they're looking, how they want to use their space. But we don't necessarily, we certainly don't see that the office is dead. Everyone is not going to, sort of continue to stay at home for the long-term future. We think that what is likely to happen in the office space is that the way that we use the space is going to be different. And, we think about that a little bit in terms of, like how the space was used differently. If you think about the way it was used 10 years ago and to what we've done recently. I think one of the biggest changes that you'll see in spaces is maybe a growth, or don't want to necessarily call it a bloat, but a growth of the workstation size for what's there. We had been, over the past few years, compressing workstation sizes, and in most cases, we were taking that saved space and we were putting that into amenities for tenants, or amenities for the users and the employees. So it was phone rooms, and it was more conference rooms and huddle spaces and ways to connect. Now we see that, for people to feel safe inside of the office, they're potentially going to need to be in, not a bench station that's 5 feet wide and you can reach out and touch your neighbor. But the stations may go back to, and some of the models that we've looked at with clients are a model where it's more of like an L-shaped station that we're doing more, 10, 15 years ago, something like that. So we see the workstation area potentially gaining a little bit of size. To Steve's point, if people are in the office a couple of days a week, we don't necessarily see as much that people are going to be sharing stations like a true hoteling model, because they want to know that the station that they're in is theirs and theirs alone, and they control the sanitation or the cleanliness of that station, and they don't have to worry about or think about somebody who was who might have been using that station yesterday. But when you get down to it, the answer, there's not a one size fits all, or there's not a one answer fits all for how state spaces are going to be used. It's going to be industry specific. There are certain industries, and I put architecture certainly in this question, or in this category, is that we're a highly collaborative field, and we need to work across the table with our coworkers to really sort of develop and create designs. That model transfers into a lot of different industries. There are other industries that are very transactional, and people can do their things just as well from home. But ultimately, to the point that Steve initially brought up, the ability for mentorship and the ability to really sort of build and build and maintain the culture, that's going to happen inside of the spaces. And those are the types of spaces that we've worked in the last few years, is creating spaces that really sort of help with the recruit and retain aspects for companies. And so we don't see the traditional office going away. It's going to change, and it's going to adapt so that people feel safer inside of that space. But we don't need to shut down downtown Chicago or any other space.
Okay. Well, you mentioned a few things, and one of the things that I think is interesting to me is that you said increasing the amount of space between the actual workers. But there has to be other ways that existing spaces can be modified. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Some of the other things that we've looked at are you actually start to look at sort of one-way circulation through spaces, so that people can move and not sort of bump into and run into somebody else. So sometimes if the workstations actually bring themselves all the way to the perimeter of the office, to the perimeter of the building, maybe we actually pull that last workstation out so that people can circulate around and do a one-way travel path. Conference rooms as well are going to adapt in their use as well. We see that they will start to thin out a little bit. There'll be smaller, fewer people inside of some of the conference rooms. We also might see that some of these conference rooms where they can be open, they might be open, because a lot of the data that's out there is about sort of the recirculation of air and people being inside of that space. And so creating a space that where the air circulates more is certainly one of those aspects. And then we also start to think about, this will be a question to go to the buildings. A lot of buildings have conference centers, and they have larger meeting rooms. We think that those are going to play more of an importance in a tenant selection of space, because where you might have a conference room that could fit 14 people. Now you might only put 4, 5, 6 people inside of that conference room for 14, because you don't want to have people that dense. So now you need to go to the building conference room, which normally would accommodate 30 people in a dense situation. But now maybe that's the right size room for like a large O-shaped table with to accommodate that 12, 14 person room. So it is. It's certainly about sort of adapting some of the standards, thinking about the way that we circulate the space, which is not something that we never really thought about as much before. How you get through the space, and then certainly it's about making people aware of what you're doing. People who have been at home, and we've got coworkers. I've got a coworker who hasn't been out of his office but twice in the last 3 months, and so and I've been out, for better or for worse, I've gone to the grocery store at least once a week. So I have a comfort level with being out. There are people who don't necessarily have a comfort level being out. And so you need to sort of make them feel comfortable that the environment that they're coming back to has been handled to allay their concerns and to allay any virus spread.
And I'm sure that by Thomas working in some of these office spaces, have you witnessed any physical changes to the typical workspace?
One item I'd like to add to what Michael was saying, with all the different layout changes and how they are going to be specific to the company, the building, their exact environment, one key factor would be wireless connectivity to consider. So as you're moving around stations for this next new normal and any other changes that happen after that, having complete wireless connectivity, not just Wi-Fi, but also DAS or distributed antenna systems providing cellular coverage throughout the space, that'll give a level of flexibility that can help in that design layout now or anything that needs to happen in the future.
Okay, and that actually leads into the next question, but I want to go back because I know we've touched on a few things that can be done for the physical layouts of the traditional workspace and how they can be adaptive. But I know that's not necessarily the only change, right? And we've mentioned the wireless connectivity. And I know that there are certain technologies available that can assist in providing this needed change, like automatic soap dispensers, which we already see, right? And automatic towel dispensers that we currently use. Speaking of innovation, this one is for Josh. Josh, how can technical innovation help the commercial real estate market bounce back from this COVID-19 fallout?
Yeah, so Albert, I'm a construction technologist, and what I really focus a lot of time on is the job site and the job trailers. How are service techs, how can they be safe? And looking at indoor renovations. I mean, we're always in hospitals, schools, and office buildings. And the beautiful thing about commercial real estate space is it's static. Construction's always changing. So we have a number of challenges today that the commercial real estate space doesn't have to worry about. So you can build a number of things into this. The thing I would say right now is we're starting to see a lot of these proximity tracing wearables that are out there. We're using them on job sites today, mounting with 3D printed brackets, these sensors. And on a job site, a lot of times it's a loud beeping sound. We're using technology like SmartVid through cameras that are identifying if people are wearing their mask, all the proper PPE. And today, those types of solutions are available in office spaces. So you're using cameras that monitor people. They can look at density, they can look at and identify and connect to your phones, can connect to your office badges, and they can send a pulse or a vibration saying that you're getting too close to another person, and it keeps that vicinity space in play. Tools like RightCrowd have been doing this for some time. There's some other solutions out there like AI from Glimpse Analytics, and you're going to continue to see this come into play going back into the space. We're also going to see an uptick in sensors with IoT connectivity. So the Internet of Things today, whether it's moving around assets and making sure that they're clean, we can use NFCF, we can use barcodes, we can use Bluetooth low energy. There's a number of things like RFID, radio frequency identification badges, that can help us collect a lot of data and make better informed decisions that can tie into our mobile apps that are going to give us the ability now to go in and book our rooms. So our conference room spaces, we can book those with power over Ethernet connectivity now, and everything having its own IP address. You can adjust your lights, you can adjust your temperatures in the room, you can go through and set it up to open up doors automatically. There's a number of capabilities with these sensors that we can start to learn from that connect to your mobile apps, giving you identification, that can connect to scheduling software like MapIQ. And then what I think we're going to have to look at, one of the things I'm interested in seeing, because I still think the pendulum is swinging right now. I've seen surveys initially, do you want to continue to work from home? Those numbers were very high. But based off what Stephen said, I'm seeing the same thing, that we're actually starting to see that pendulum swing back now. A lot of parents with young kids that are healthy, that are not in that exposed condition, I'm seeing them getting ready to get back in. Gensler released a survey just 2 weeks ago saying that 70% of the people they surveyed wanted to be in an office, 44% no days a week at a home office, 26% 1 to 2 days at a home office, and then only 30% of the respondents were out there saying that they wanted to be 3 or more days. So I do believe this pendulum swinging back. I know for most of us that have young kids, our experience with this whole thing has been very different, but we want to feel safe. But these symptom tracking apps that are out there today, privacy is going to always be an issue when it comes to technology with facial recognition, everything that's going on. We're going to have to pay attention to this. So much about this virus that's unique is so many people are asymptomatic. So it's thermal cameras can help, but a lot of people don't have a temperature. So what do? Well, you have to track their access through the building, who they come in contact with. And then once they test positive, then you have to be able to go back and see who was talking to who. And there's a lot of concerns around Big Brother around that, but those are things that we have to figure out going forward. And what is that safe place to play in to make sure people feel comfortable with that type of access to their personal day and who they're coming in contact with.
Yes. Now, you mentioned a few technologies that are out there that I have not heard that is actually in the mainstream as of yet. Are there any emerging technologies that people are not aware of that come into the mainstream soon? And if so, how far out are these advances before the end user can actually expect them to be implemented?
So a lot of these technologies it's not so much about implementation of them, it's the cost. These office traffic lights, as we were saying earlier, we were having the conversation about traffic flow. Well, that's something that we are definitely seeing right now, that if you need to access a bathroom, well, you need to know how many people are in that restroom before you walk in, and you can't see through the door today. But having these types of solutions that can monitor how many people went in, how many people are going out, giving you a holding space so that you can keep that 6-foot distance, which traffic flow, they can buzz you and say someone's coming around the corner, pay attention. So there's technologies like the traffic light flows. There's also a lot of technology right now when it comes to HVAC tech. We're seeing a lot of people go in and use the higher MERV filters. Plus, they're really bumping up their air conditioning systems to flush out any airborne particulates. And a lot of people have been doing a lot of requests for the UV filters on the HVAC system. So there's some things there, in addition to lights that now have the violet light mixed in with the white light that can help sanitize spaces on surfaces at working spaces. And then where I think we're really going to see two big upticks in technology is analytics. Now, tools like IBM Maximo have been out there for a long time with worker insights. The need now, the necessity to adopt these workflows, to be able to monitor, take this data that we're collecting through these sensors and turn it into something that's actionable to create a safer work environment. It's going to be more of a need to do that. And then going out there a little bit further, we're going to continue to see robots adopted. We're seeing them on job sites now, like Boston Dynamics Spot, and we're seeing the rovers, and a lot of people have robotic vacuums. But using robots to go in and consistently sanitize and clean spaces, we're gonna see more of those types of technologies coming in the future as well.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And again, I know that we are getting closer and closer to reopening. We are actually entering into phase 4 as of tomorrow. And Thomas, as a contractor, you're on the ground implementing some of these new technological solutions. What modifications do you think can be done quickly? Because again, we're entering into those phases and we're going into the next phases quickly. Which technologies do you think can be implemented quickly to create a more contactless environment?
Thanks, Albert. There are a variety of technologies available to create a safer and more touch-free or contactless environment. Josh touched on quite a few. There's thermal cameras. There's other hands-free options for access control, turning on other systems like AV in a conference room. You could have a proximity sensor instead of somebody touching a standard light switch. There's sanitizing lights that are out there. There's either the UV variety that Josh mentioned, and there's also the visible white light that's available that can sanitize in different ways. And then there's a couple different options and benefits to wireless connectivity, as I touched on before. So starting with the thermal cameras, they are a proven technology that have been around for a very long time. They've just never had the need to help businesses get back to work during a pandemic. So they are FDA approved. There's guidelines out there for the proper and recommended use of these thermal cameras. There's a couple important notes though. So these cameras, they do not detect COVID. They do not cure anybody of COVID. What they're doing is looking for elevated temperatures as an initial screening option to help prevent people coming in with a fever. So the CDC has a stat that 83 to 99% of COVID patients have a fever. So as mentioned before, that does not solve every single COVID patient. There's asymptomatic patients as well. But what it can do for the vast majority of people that are entering a facility, it can identify if they do have an elevated temperature. But it's not just the technology that needs to happen. You don't just install a thermal camera and all your worries go away, right? The thermal camera gives you that means, but there's protocols that need to be put in place to properly utilize that technology. We talked about traffic being routed. So anybody entering a space would need to walk through a defined area. And there's other systems that need to be in place to address anybody that enters a facility with an elevated temperature, and then what to do as that next step for a secondary check, pulling them to the side, etc. But the technology is great. It can detect temperatures with an accuracy of up to a half a degree Fahrenheit. So the CDC recommends anybody with a temperature of 100.4 or greater should stay at home. That's a clear indicator that something is not right. It doesn't mean that there's COVID, but that's what the CDC is recommending. So accuracy is key for these systems. They do have the ability to capture temperatures of multiple people at a time, up to 30 individuals. But clearly, the fewer people at a time, the higher that accuracy level will be there. There's options where you can have someone stop and pose and have their temperature taken, or there's some free-flowing options where it captures everybody's temperature walking in, and it can identify what individual has an elevated temperature. So there's a chance that they don't even think about getting their temperature taken. They would just walk in, and if nobody has an elevated temperature, people can get back to work, customers can focus on spending money, or whatever that venue is meant to do. You're not thinking about a TSA type checkpoint process. So the Defense Department, they've been using thermal cameras for years and years, and now they're using it to check for elevated temperatures. Major healthcare providers that we're working with are implementing these throughout most of their entrances and throughout their locations. And really every venue type has a need for some type of screening of elevated temperatures. And there's a camera option. There's also a kiosk option where people can walk up to the kiosk. They can put their face in a specific spot the temperature's taken, and it'll tell you if you green if you have a good temperature. It'll flash red and send an alert to a security personnel or someone on staff. They can also detect if you're wearing a mask or not, and it'll state, please see an attendant for a mask. So the technology is evolving. It's getting a lot more specific to address COVID-related items from an elevated temperature standpoint. There's also a variety of other contactless options. So there's hands-free light switches that we're installing, motion-activated lights. You can tie in, as I mentioned before, AV systems. So when you walk into a conference room, instead of touching that high-touch control panel to turn on the monitor, to go ahead and access any of the cameras or other audiovisual items that has that single pad, there's ways those can turn on automatically, or there's even applications that could route the control of your AV systems and other technologies to your cell phone or to your laptop. So you would only continue to touch the devices that you're working with, and you could have a variety of people handling different functions, but you're not touching that same high touch point area. There's, as Josh mentioned, there's ways to monitor real-time information about how occupied a location is. We're installing screens that are tied into a floor plan. As people check in, you can see what desks are available. if you're at occupancy, and you can also check even before going into the office to see if you've met the threshold of people entering that space. Sanitizing lights. So in general, there's two primary items. Again, these have been used in a variety of other applications, just not necessarily for COVID. So there's UV lights that are used in hospitals, in surgical areas, that sanitize lights or that sanitize the space, and they are proven to be able to break down and destroy viruses. Those are not typically able to be turned on when people are in that space. So there's something called far UV that is being used where it is safer. There's regulated levels. You might have seen thresholds that people walk through to get into maybe an airport or a facility, and the lights sanitize you as you walk through about a 6-foot space. There's also the other type of option for the sanitizing, be the visible white light. This is something that can sanitize bacteria, mold, a lot of items. They can be on at all times. They're safe for people working in and around those spaces, but they are not proven to break down or destroy viruses. And the good thing for both of these options, there's fixed and there's portable options. So if you're not looking to add additional light fixtures, you can integrate some sort of UV light or visible white light into a portable unit that the cleaning crew or designated trained personnel can utilize. So there's a variety of options there from a light source sanitation perspective. And really the last technology, and I touched on it before, would be wireless connectivity. So wireless was already becoming not just a nice to have, but a required component in the commercial real estate space. So if you're looking between two different venues, one has cellular connectivity, all your employees' cell phones work, the other one doesn't. That's been a deciding factor to the point that some people are calling it the fourth utility, water, power, gas, and now wireless connectivity. So what wireless connectivity can do as these spaces evolve, as the layouts change now, and then if they change later, these workstations, if you're connected wirelessly through Wi-Fi or cellular connectivity, the flexibility that you have to make changes, we were not expecting the pandemic. Abrupt changes were needed, and then we might need to make more changes. So to have that flexibility from a technology connectivity perspective is really key to address our current situation and be prepared for what's to come with the evolution of the workspace in the commercial real estate environment.
Wow, that's awesome. That's a lot of technology that's out there to make sure that individuals can feel safe in the workplace. And I want to recognize that we do have a few questions. Thank you, Susan and Mark, for your questions. We'll make sure we get to those at the end. Now, we've discussed some physical layout changes, of course, and some new tech options that are available that can be put in place in order to prepare for a safe and productive return to the workspace. These tools can also help immediately accelerate Chicago's robust economic return as it returns throughout these various phases, like we talked about earlier. What I would like to know is each of one of you's particular point of view on how commercial real estate customers can expect to determine what is needed for their individual situations. Because we know that every situation is different. So we'll start with Josh, and then we'll connect with Michael, Stephen, and then we'll end with you, Thomas.
Albert, I think it's going to be different for every person. I am seeing a lot of people that are ready to go back to an office space to a limited capacity and start to feel comfortable with that. I think we're going to have greater challenges in accessing transportation and metro systems getting to the office. I think we're going to definitely see changes in how our office space operates and how we utilize the space, and we are going to have to spread out. But I believe there's a number of other challenges that we have to face getting to the office that are going to cause more problems for the office that we have to address. I think we can address a lot of these things in a controlled environment, listening to our employees, understanding their challenges. If they're in a home where they have a condition, someone has a pre-exposed condition that they have to pay attention to, it's not a one size fits all for every single person in your company. You're going to have to survey, you're going to have to listen, you're going to have to really think about this, and it's going to be a phased rollback. I'm here in Georgia, and I can tell you, we opened up right out of the gate. And while they opened up restaurants, they opened up bars, they've opened up businesses, traffic has still not come back to close to the levels that they were in Atlanta pre-pandemic. People are still trying to figure this out. And even though the government is opening in a number of states and to different levels and different phases, people are going to work with their employers and make these decisions to the best interest in the health and their well-being. And we see that in Georgia. We see that in other places. While the numbers are still going up, there is some fatigue around this, and people are ready to get back to the office. So it's not the end of the commercial real estate space. I think it's going to change and it's going to evolve. But it's going to land somewhere in between where it is today, where it was pre-pandemic, and it'll fall somewhere in the middle, leveraging technology.
Okay, thank you. Michael?
Sorry, I was going on really eloquently, but my mute was on, of course. I would echo a lot of what Josh just said. It's going to boil down to, how you determine what you do. It's a case-by-case basis, and so you have to talk with your employees. You have to communicate with them because, again, everybody's experience is different in how they address this. What they've seen, what they've experienced in their neighborhood, or maybe what their relatives across the country, across the world have experienced. That all influences kind of what they've, how they perceive this virus. So I think it's all got to go back to, starting with the CDC guidelines and reading all that information, and understanding what the government is recommending that we do and what those rules are. But ultimately, you've got to go back to your people because they're the ones who need to feel safe when they come back to the office. And so, you don't want to implement a change that, that they feel doesn't go far enough or goes too far or what have you. So talking to your people is the key to all of it.
Yeah, and I certainly agree with both of those points. We've had three tours in the last 3 weeks, and on each tour they follow the same basic path. Which show up, you've got a mask on, you don't shake hands, you hit elbows. There's an awkwardness to that first. You walk through the lobby, there's plexiglass in front of the security, there's arrows all over the floor. It's kind of odd. And then you get in the elevator for the first time, and there's circles in the corner, and it feels very awkward. You're all pushing yourselves up against that back wall. But on each of the three tours, we got up to the first space, and after that first awkwardness of the first building, it was business as usual, more so than I think anybody realized, myself realized, and the end users and us, we all talked about it at the end and said, once we got into the spaces, it became business as usual. And yes, things are going to be different, but as we start acclimating back into that world, it's going to come back to us very, very quickly. And being on those tours made us feel that way. And a couple clients we've had, end users that have gotten back into the space, has said something comparable, that we have to go at the pace that our employees want to. And if you're not comfortable being there, we're not going to force you. We don't want you there, right? We want people together for collaboration and training and mentorship, but we're not going to push that pace. But the general consensus we've had for groups that have started going back has said this has felt more normal and back to business as usual quicker than we anticipated that.
So again, everybody has said some very great points, and it comes down to being informed, not just with your employees, but also with your existing technology on what you have and where you'll need to go. So what we would do is immediately perform a needs assessment to understand what your capabilities are now, what the new office layout will need to be, and what exact technology will best fit. So it's not one size fits all. It's definitely a custom approach. So you need to align yourself with an electrical contractor, whatever other trade is involved that is certified and knowledgeable with each of the different technologies. And ideally, find a partner that is well versed in multiple disciplines. So there's some integration between electrical and AV. Wireless can complement low voltage and other systems. So definitely stay informed, align yourself with the appropriate partner, and work with somebody that understands and is able to converge and operate multiple disciplines.
Okay, great. Well, listen, we have a few questions, and before we get to those questions, and then please, I encourage everyone's participation. Please submit any questions that you have. We have a very informative panel here. But before we get to those participants' questions, can each of you in 1 minute or less share your thoughts on what businesses should take away from this conversation as we shift to the reopening offices and bring more employees back to the workplace?
You didn't tell us who goes first.
Well, let's do this. Let's go in reverse. We'll start with Thomas.
All right, thank you, Albert. So really it's an extension of what I was just saying, where you need to be informed. You need to find the correct technology for your space, for your needs now, that has some level of flexibility in there to address when things change again. So if there is an evolution of the workspace where maybe you have an A and a B team, as Stephen mentioned, coming in at different times, different days, with social distancing, as we get closer to complete back to normal, there'll need to be some type of adjustments at that point as well. So that wireless connectivity item, it will still be very important to adapt as the rules and the employee and customer comfort levels change. And then just the last item I'll mention is you need to also go beyond the technology. So when you engage with a partner at any level, the technology is only as good as how it's used and how well the customer understands each and every aspect of that item. So a thermal camera, if you install that camera, it's standalone, it's not going to do what you need without those beyond the technology protocols and plans in place. So you definitely need a partner that is able to have that discussion and help you fully integrate each of these items into your plans now and in the future.
Okay, thank you for that. Stephen?
I think listening, the groups we talk with, the CFOs, the HR directors of companies, is really just listening to your people, your employees, as much and more so than you ever have before, right? This is the environment where you can alienate people quickly if you're going at a pace that they necessarily don't want to go at as you start going back to the office. And we've been working with our consulting arm a lot to help companies with surveying their employees and listening to their employees and making their employees feel like they are a part of any discussion that's happening. How do you avoid a knee-jerk reaction as an executive and maybe really change your space in a way that could actually hurt you long-term? So it's how do you listen to your people and then change your strategy for your company as you reopen, and know that this is going to continue to change in the next 30, 60, 90, 100. It's just going to be a process that we're all going to live with and work through. And just saying to yourself, we don't know what the answers are going to be, but in that we're going to listen to our employees, we're going to work with our employees, and we want people to feel comfortable in going back.
Right. I would echo that as well. And so then that sets up, and I know I've said it a million times. I'm sure everybody else has said it a million times, that it changes day to day. It changes week to week, right? We learn more about the virus and we learn more about things. And so when you come back into the office, it's going to continue to change. So it's not as though, if you establish a plan today and implement the plan next month, and, everybody comes back to the office or what have you, we all know you're not done, right? It has to be constantly evaluated and relooked at, because here in Illinois, we're probably we may move out of phase 4 back to phase 3 if something happens, and so we have to you have to be able to sort of think about and adapt. And so along those lines, to kind of reiterate some of what's been said, it probably makes sense to sort of include maybe there's a task force team of employees that then sort of help to kind of gather the sentiment from employees. Maybe you're not able to survey everybody on a weekly, monthly basis, but you need to make sure that you're connected to the pulse of what employees are thinking and what their concerns are, so that you can be sure to address that.
And I'll say this, while I do think things are changing day to day, I think some things are now forever changed. A lot of executives that would have never allowed us to work from home and never given it a chance were forced to allow us to work from home. And they've seen their productivity go up. They've seen that people have the ability to be responsible and work from home. And those that enjoy working from home, that are more productive, that like that environment, then their decision should be different from someone like me that likes to go into an office. The office was there to increase productivity, to bring us together. A lot has changed with technology that we can see each other now and we can interact, and I can get a feel from each of your voices. And I think there's going to be now people that don't come back into the office quite as much. It'll be unique to see them because they can get their work done. I think we're going to see that a lot from accounting, but I think others are going to see that they want to be in there more. And I do think this is forever changed. It has exposed a lot of people in our industry who do not can't imagine not having control of that office environment, making sure that people are being productive. We're forced into this, and now they see, what was I doing? We're probably not going to grow our office. We may keep it as is, and we may figure out for us, we may grow it. It's going to be a mix of each company and their needs.
Great, thank you. Well, we'll get to the questions from the audience. And this question is directed from Michael. If cash is king, as Steve said, how will users be able to afford larger cubes, more spacing, new equipment that may be voice activated, and et cetera?
Yeah, it's a good question. Thank you. I think we should make Steve answer this question, by the way, because he's the one who said cash is king, or was it Gordon Gecko who said it first? But anyhow, Mark, I think the answer to the question, and I appreciate it because, we've been thinking a lot about this in terms of how we're going to create new space, and, what the space looks like, that we're creating for a tenant who is relocating. But you're right. The reality is we have to understand how we're adapting existing space, and somebody may not be, I'm going to take another 1,000, 10,000 square feet in order to implement all these changes. I think that one potential solution would be, if there's a modification of the space, be it workstation sizes or what have you, where you may have to space people out, you're going to have to look at other solutions that don't necessarily impact the size of the space. I'm specifically thinking about if you have workstations where people sit 5 feet apart from each other, and rather than purchasing new workstations and spreading them out, we've now got to figure out ways for those people to sort of spread out amongst the place that you have. And so maybe that is people are in the office 2 days a week, and so you're alternating when people are in the space, so that again you're not taking additional space. So I think you've got to work inside of the existing space to kind of keep those costs low, so that then you can invest in, if it's wireless technology or laptop computers for people who previously were on desktops, or things along those lines.
Yeah, and I'll say this, the cost of technology is always going down. And the more of this, the supply and demand of this will drive the price down even more so. I mean, you look at the cost of technology and how it has significantly decreased over the last decade, whether it's a computer or TVs and other than our phones, but they just keep getting, they're amazing devices that we have in our pockets. The cost of those continue to go up, but they are supercomputers in our hands. So I think the cost will go down. And then you look at the increased productivity, people not having to commute. You look at all those things. I think the costs are going to balance out for companies. It is going to be a balance. You're going to have to invest a little bit more, but you're going to get it on the back end, as you don't have so many people working in the office, working from home, and the cost will balance out over time.
And I think you've also got the aspect that there is, if this had happened 10 years ago, Zoom and GoTo and, Google Chat, whatever you want, those things didn't exist, right? Or they were very expensive things to have. Now everybody has it, and, everyone's got FaceTime. So, I'm thankful the fact that we have all these tools that we can still be productive. And then it makes me curious and interested as to, what the next 2, 5, 10 years creates, and how the technology will continue to evolve. From the get-go, I remember calling my brother who works in the technology space and saying, it's interesting all the things that we have to do, but what's going to come out of this? What are we going to do differently? What are we going to learn about ourselves? And we've talked a lot about that today. We've learned that we can work from home. So I'm optimistic, and I think about like how are we going to change things? And I'm not going to sit here today certainly and say that we know what that is, but we know that your space is going to be, the physical space that we design is going to be different the way that you use it in year 2 than it is on the day that you move in. And so we always think about understanding how your space can adapt and change over time because change is constant.
Yes. And actually, Steve, I think this is a good question for you. Again, what does affordability look like, for the spaces and the new equipment that are going to be used for this new normal?
We are yet to have a client who has ordered new furniture or is drastically going to change their existing space. More so, what they've said to us is we are going to simply de-densify our space on our own in the coming months because we don't want to go spend money on new furniture. That being said, we have had a few groups talk about taking some of their collaborative areas, those large, wide open areas, and saying, is there a way that we can redesign this or move the furniture around in a way where it makes people feel more comfortable? But thus far, we've had some end users talking about it, but I also think they're going to talk about it more, and end users are going to think about this more as they start getting back in their physical space. I think right now it's, let's get in there, see how we feel, and then start making pivots and changes after we're in.
Okay, great. And we also have a question from Susan, and she asks, does increased air circulation through HVAC systems spread the airborne virus throughout the space, or the airborne dilute the virus?
So I've read a few things about this, and based off ASHRAE, based what the news, it's a magazine I read a lot about from the sheet metal industry and the HVAC industry, is that bumping up your airflow actually does dilute that more. So it can break it up, and you can also, with a lot of these systems, you can increase the ventilation from outside, which can go into that as well. So it based off everything that I've read, they do recommend that you bump up increase the air circulation to dilute the particulates.
Yeah, and I would also chime in. I was on another panel with the HVAC consulting engineer, and he was saying that for those of you that are in Chicago, we're fortunate in the fact that the way that the systems are designed, because we have days of the year, in the spring and fall, where you could sort of do 100% outside air and get the cooling that you need. That most systems in Chicago are designed that you can go 100% outside air. And so that then, that sort of takes takes the internal air and pushes it outside, and it brings in all outside air, which is a better solution for it. So it's a conversation that you potentially would have with your landlord to maybe increase the quantity of outside air, whenever available.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So it looks like that we are running up against our time. That is all the questions that we have. You gentlemen have been very knowledgeable and have basically expressed to the audience your expertise, so much so that we did not have that many questions, which again means that information is getting out and that you're very informative and that our audience can go back and leave that much more informed. So on behalf of Power in Chicago, I would like to again thank everyone who has joined in with us today. Thank the panelists, and I would like to turn it back over to Todd.
Albert, this was great event. You actually made me pay attention the whole time. I turned my email off and I'm in. This has been great. I have to tell you all, this is, I think, our 46th, 47th webinar. I have learned so much. I think I'm probably now the smartest person about COVID and industrial and office real estate in the nation. No, I'm kidding. But this was good. You guys are great. I want to thank Power in Chicago again. Great group. We love working with y'all, and we're glad to help spread that. Again, this is recorded. It's on our website. If you want to watch it again, forward it to colleagues. Go back and see a section. Maybe you missed something. Maybe you were multitasking. I don't know. But again, reach out to us as a company because we're trying to find ways to get connected. But I would be remiss if I didn't say we have live events planned again. We know you want to get together. We've been polling audiences. We have found out that it's only about a third of you that want to get together right now. A third are on the fence and a third don't want to. They're not quite ready. But for those third that are ready to get together, we're going to have events for Chicago area. Our first event's going to be late July in Indiana. Going to just cross the border over to a really cool data center and get you all back together for those that want to. And, Minnesota's coming back. Texas is coming back. We're having events. We have an event in Indiana for Indiana people on July 8th. So this is exciting. The world is kind of coming back to, I don't know, like you all said, maybe not normalcy, but it's exciting to be able to see everybody again. So thank you, panelists. Feel free to log off. I'm just going to flip through everybody's contact info one more time for the people that are watching and want to see it. But thank you. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day, wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks,
you,
everyone.
guys.
for having
Great
me.
job. Thank you.
Thank you.